Can you hear me now? I can't hear you now. Oh, it's because your mic, man. You're gonna have to
Better,
put your mic up close to your face.
better.
No, it sounds like you're talking through your headphones that you were just talking on. You know what's gonna be awesome is I'm leaving all of this in there.
I know.
This is the fun of video calls these days because if you switch, like we switched to a new technology, we use one for work and then we switch
Yep.
over to this new one.
So better for the sound.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
that's okay, man. It happens, like this is the world that we're all living in at some point. So,
Absolutely true.
uh, you've got a normal background, what you normally have. I've got a different one. I'm actually not even at my house. So
Nice.
the world went crazy this morning. I've got the stars have aligned. Both my
Hmm.
children have decided to clean their room, maybe under major threats from my wife.
Maybe,
Um,
maybe not.
Maybe not. I doubt that they just did it on their own, but what they both have their little echoes or their little Amazon echoes in their rooms, and they both
Gotcha.
have competing music going on. They're
Of
cleaning
course.
the rooms. My office is the room in between the two of them, and I did not want to disturb the balance of nature and disrupt cleaning rooms. So I know with you having kids, you understand the clean up after yourself stuff. So
Yeah, definitely. But for me, it's a more of a long memory than what you're going through now. So,
yeah. So let's talk about uh, what you do. What is your world in tech? And let's talk about that. And I've got some things we can jump into as well because I've got some questions I want to ask you about
okay.
tech stuff. So let's jump in. What is it that your role is in technology?
So right now, and it fluctuates. It seems sometimes on a daily basis, but for the most part, right now, it's analytics data on the marketing side of things. So my background for a long time has been demand generation and understanding how campaigns are working, how lead gen efforts are working. But as time has gone on, it's just been more and more about the data that's back behind it. I started back in high school thinking I was going to be an engineer in college, and I've just kind of had that engineering mindset this whole time. So I've always been on the technology side of marketing, and so as data has progressed, I've seen more and more opportunities there. So that's where I decided to focus. So
Cool.
yeah, it's mostly around getting the metrics for what everybody needs, whether it's sales, whether it's marketing, whether it's ops, finance, whatever. That's what I do.
Yeah. So real quick, I think that you're still connected to your other headphones because every time you move around, I hear like fabric.
All right, fix this. So this should be better then. I'll hold this one out here, and it should sound much better.
Okay. So I didn't want that stuff. I mean, the distractions of me
Yeah, yeah.
being crazy and all that. Just I don't want to distract from the message. So in terms of like your background, I mean, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, I think I'm similar in that, and this is probably a good message for any of the young folks that may listen to this. Uh, the thing you want to start off with and like do when you're in college and you have these hopes and aspirations for what you're going to go do tends to not end up being what you do in the end.
No.
I don't know very many people that started off with a path that said, this is the thing I'm going to do, and then they actually ended up doing that as their
Yeah,
career, which is interesting.
yeah, I totally agree. And I've been running or working with a lot of interns over the last 4 or 5 years because I got my start as an intern. So for me, that's always been kind of a passion is to make sure to give the next generation a chance. But I always tell them 10% of what you learn in college is what you're going to use on the job, and the other 90% is on the job training.
Yeah. Yeah, the college thing is really about like teaching that capacity to learn on your own,
Hmm.
being able to
Yeah,
take volumes of information. So
agreed.
let's talk about volumes of information. Let's segue into that. You are the
Good one.
data guy.
Yes, sir.
You know everything about data. You have Rain Man esque abilities to look at a piece of data and go, that's not right or that is right or whatever. How do you how do you begin to comprehend and understand data? What is your approaches that when somebody puts a data set in front of you, what are kind of your approaches to that data?
So first you have to understand where it's coming from, right? You have to understand what the background of it is, and so you can kind of get a sense for how big the box is or how small the box is that you're playing with. And once you kind of get that understanding of the data and you get familiar with it, then you can start to see. It's almost like looking at the lines of code in the matrix. You can start to see the data points kind of stand out, and they jump out at you. They kind of tell that story. And the more familiar you get with it, the more consistent you get with it, the easier it is to read the code.
That's interesting. So you're kind of saying that you don't really necessarily need to know the business reason behind some of the data that you're looking at. Just start to find patterns and
Yeah, more so. I mean, the more context you get behind it, the better.
sure.
Like if you're looking at sales cycles or you're looking at return on campaigns or something like that, you kind of, like I said, kind of need to know how it's defined. But once you get that basic definition of what it is that you're looking at and kind of get some of that context, then the rest of it's just there, and you start seeing the patterns and the trends, and you start um, seeing the nuances of how it shifts a little bit here, a little bit there, but that can kind of make a big difference downstream.
Sure. So, I think when you start talking about that, I mean, what are the things? I know it's easy. Every system that we have that we interact with technology wise or in life gathers data. It gathers data
Yeah.
about us. It's something I talked about with Hal last week on his
Hmm.
episode, just from a privacy perspective. But data, there's so much data out there. What data, from your perspective, when you look at, let's talk sales and marketing because
Yeah.
that's our world. What
Right.
data is important to a salesperson or a marketer today?
So from the marketing side, a lot of it is shifting more towards intent. And intent's been around for a while, as in like retargeting and remarketing type stuff that you can do through Google or Bing or whatever. But it's become more advanced as we're able to capture more and more data and collect it, store it, analyze it through using like machine learning and AI. That intent behind what people are doing is gold these days. And whether the intent is from cookies or people hitting certain sites, or it's done by search terms. There's different companies out there that have different hooks and to pull different parts of the data across. But it's that for a marketer, that intent data is gold, because if you can get ahead of where people are at, if you can understand what they're doing, where they're looking, then you can kind of get ahead of them in the buyer's process, and you can steer that conversation the way you need it to.
Sure.
Then from a sales perspective, it's accuracy more than anything else. They want to know, okay, now the marketing's talked to them. What's the customer looking for? What things do they need to solve for in their world? Is it the right person that they need to talk to? I mean, simple things like that, but they need the accuracy to continue the conversation once marketing's done with it.
Yeah. So I'm interested to see how that's going to work. I mean, you talk about the intent data piece of this, and
Mm,
data as a whole. I mean, we look at the GDPR standards, and then the new stuff coming out of California.
yeah,
Those things are inhibiting, I think,
no,
or
for sure.
uh, I don't know if they're maybe inhibiting, but maybe just bringing new challenges or different ways that we need to start looking at data because I think when you start talking about intent data, you're having to gather a lot of information about somebody
Hmm.
to garner that intent, right? You're having to use
Yeah,
a ton of AI, machine learning, and all kinds of fun stuff to try to figure out, you know, the direction that somebody needs to go with this stuff. So, um, sorry, there's like the world's loudest thing going on outside my window over here.
it's not coming through on my side, so I think you get it.
Well, I was just making sure like they weren't about to like drive through the front of my sister's house, which is where I'm at. It may be the trash guys. It's trash day.
Eh, there you
So,
go.
but when you start looking at that intent data and you start trying to figure
Hmm.
out, where people are going, the simple act of like turning on cookies,
Hmm.
it's something I'm hyper aware of as a marketer, and somebody that uses this data for a bunch of different activities that we do.
Right.
I I tend to be okay with giving people data because I know it makes the marketer's job a little easier,
It
right?
does.
Um, I tend to be like, okay, well, that's fine. I'll accept all the cookies. I'm cool with that because I don't, you're not doing anything crazy with it. You're trying to sell me something. I'm either going to buy it or I'm not. I'm smart enough. I'm good enough. I can figure out whether or not you're marketing to me or not. And also, I kind of want to see that you're marketing to me because I want to steal your ideas,
It's fun
just to
sometimes.
be honest.
Yeah.
Um, so how do you think, when you start looking at data, you talked about the intent data, and that's real future looking to me. That's like crystal ball stuff.
Yeah.
Is there data that we have access as marketer and salespeople today that we should be looking at daily, that we should be measuring our success off of? What are those, what are some of those key metrics that you think any marketer or any salesperson should just sit down and go with? And I frame this question around looking at like somebody starting a business or a small
Yeah.
business, somebody out there that's, not a big corporation that doesn't have, endless amounts of resources. If they have to focus on 10, 20 metrics or even less, what would
Yeah.
those be?
So for the startup businesses, I mean, your website traffic that you're getting is probably first and foremost, right? So how many visitors are you getting? If you're doing any ads, what's your click-through rate looking like? Uh, how are you attracting people and how long are they staying on your site? And then once they're there, are you getting them to do what you want to do, filling out a form, go to a certain page down a certain path, that type of stuff. And that's really the basics. Once you start collecting additional stuff like through emails or, like I said, banner ads through Google, then you start adding, I don't want to call it layers of complexity, but you're starting to stitch multiple sources together, trying to get that picture of what you're trying to see. But if you had to start with one thing, start with your traffic on your website.
Okay. And that's just Google Analytics. That's the free Google
Yeah,
Analytics. There's nothing crazy you got to do to it. Just turn it on.
no, it's just the basic stuff. Make sure your tracking's turned on and you're good to go. You'll start seeing results instantly.
Yeah, that's cool. When you start thinking about you play a unique role for the organization that what I know you through.
Mm.
You seem to be the grease in the gears between marketing and sales in terms of being able to provide data to those two sources.
Yeah.
How do you approach bridging the gap between marketing and sales? Because let's be honest, you talk to every organization I've ever worked for, sales and marketing, oil and water most days.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
Adversarial at times.
and it just kind of, yeah. And you've been able to bridge that gap for us where we are. What are some of the strategies that you've used? How have you approached that to make that a successful relationship?
So there are a couple experiences that I went through that helped shape things to where they are now. One was I sat with an inside sales team for a year at a couple companies ago. I was the demand gen guy sitting in with sales. And so when the leads I generated sucked, I heard about it
Yeah.
front, center, loudly. Um, and then another company I was at, we used HubSpot for our marketing automation and went to a training class. They told me I was the first class to go through this special training that they did. Don't know. But they used a term called smarketing, which I thought was really hokey at the time, but it works. And it's just the concept of sales and marketing have to work together and just not wanting to, but have to in order to make this work. And so when you get away from that adversarial or who's doing the better job type thing, you realize that it really is a true partnership. Then it starts to come together and you realize you're working towards that common good. And I know that sounds like cheesy and cliche, but it's actually kind of true.
Sure. Yeah, and I think if as cheesy and cliche as you may think it sounds, it's really the goal. I mean, I think it's the goal
Yeah.
between any sales and marketing department that you should strive for. And so, kudos to you for that work because I know it's hard to do. But to think about that, I think what you said is pretty important. I think what's something we miss a lot of in organizations today is kind of like going through a day in the life of.
Mm.
They used to, I worked in an organization that used to have a thing where it was like you could put your name in a hat to win a drawing to like
Hmm.
shadow the CEO or something like that. And,
Okay. Yeah,
it's
yeah, that's
like,
cool.
or a VP or a person that's in this department or whatever. And I feel like it shouldn't be that, right? I know there's and I'll tell this since I'm in my sister's house, I'll tell her story about this. So
Okay.
she worked for waste management for a while,
Okay.
and she was
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
accounting and so forth. They made them ride in a trash truck. Like
Makes sense.
that was part of their training. They had to go ride
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
trash truck. They had to do they had to go live the life of the people doing the work. And I think your comments around like the sales piece and the day in the life of and going through that process of sitting there and seeing what they're doing, I think that's really critical and something that we miss a lot of. And I think it's hard, it's organizationally, it's hard because you have to say, okay, we're willing to take this person's day or week,
Hmm.
let's take 40 hours. We're going to take this person's 40 hours out of the pool of available resources for the week and put them to shadow and to
Right.
learn. And that's, it's an investment of time and energy to get them into that and do that work. But I think you pointed out, I mean, there's a lot of value in something like that.
Yeah, there definitely is. I think I fixed my headphones. So I'm gonna take these off real quick. Um, but yeah, once you understand what people go through, and especially like I said, sitting with sales for a year, um, I saw what they went through, what they dealt with on calls when the data wasn't right or the leads weren't good enough, and so
Yeah.
it makes a difference. The more the time that they can spend selling rather than bitching about the leads, the better off everybody's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole time selling. I mean, they've got a pretty thankless job. I mean, having to reach out to
Hmm.
folks and trust as well. I mean, it's like you're saying, hey, you don't want to look like an idiot when you call somebody. And I've had that happen
Exactly.
to me. People call me, or you've seen the marketing where people reach out to you
Yeah.
and they're trying to sell you, air compressor services. That was a recent one that somebody showed me uh,
Yeah.
from our team that was like they got put on a list about facility maintenance and they have nothing to do with it, but the guy, it kind of makes you look a little bit like a buffoon when you reach out to somebody and you're like, hey, are you interested in XYZ? And they're like, no, not at all. Wrong guy or
Yeah. Or
gal or
even just
whoever, right?
the simple things like getting the name right, the first name of somebody is hugely important. If you
Yeah,
mess that up, the whole rest of the conversation's done.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting. So data, do you feel like from all the data and stuff that you've looked at over the years, do you feel like when you talked about measurement of like GA and so forth around web traffic and so forth, do you feel like that there's an industry specific set of data? Like if you go into, the industry we're in or go pick six other industries, do you feel like there's like a difference in the data that you should be collecting just to be like minimally successful between sales and marketing between those industries? Or does kind of every industry feel like should be tracking the same?
At a base level, I think it's all basically the same. So uh, there may be slight nuances as far as like the sales cycle length or the number of people that are in the buying process or something like that. But at its core, you're still looking for web traffic and conversions that come off of that. If you're sending emails, you're still looking for clicks and opens. Um, Once you get the leads generated from sales, you want to know the effectiveness of did it go from just a basic entry lead to something that's qualified for sales to talk to. And once sales gets it, does it go down to a closed deal or a sale of some sort? Those basic measurement points, it's the same across all industries.
Yeah,
Once you get into more industry specific, maybe it's certain types of companies that look like they're better customers and better fits, or maybe it's you want to get your total sales cycle down from 9 months to 6 months, or 9 hours to 6 hours, or whatever it may be. That gets more nuanced, but at its core, no, there's a few basic tenets that everybody needs to know.
sure, sure. When you think about how data has changed over the years, you kind of touched on it looking at like intent data and so forth.
Hmm.
Is there, where do you think data is going for us? Like knowing the challenges of dirty data, knowing the challenges of every system being able to pull data, where do you think some of the new like evergreen or blue ocean opportunities are for data science or data collection or data governance? I mean, anything related to data, but just kind of like where the future of it you think would be going.
So you hit a really good point in that every system that you talk to, there's more and more and more data being collected, and it's just at times it's overwhelming because it's
Mhm.
just every system thinks that they are the gold standard and they've got all the key data that you need, right? And that's just it. But then you have to stitch that with another one, with another one, with another one. And before you know it, you've got 6 different gold standard systems that don't talk to each other. So figuring out ways to get all the data integrated in a meaningful way with unique keys, and you're not getting duplicates in there, you're not getting a bunch of noise in the system. I think that's probably the next big area for marketing as a whole is figuring out a way to kind of piece that all together in a consistent way. Because without that, there's too many systems and there's just too much noise. But once you get that data together, I think data visualization is starting to take off a lot more. Being able to take large sets of data and boil it down into a simple 3-image picture that tells the story that you need it to tell. Because let's face it, when you're talking to any owner of a company, any leadership, sales, it doesn't matter. If you can't tell the story in a nice succinct picture in about, I don't know, 15, 20 seconds, you've lost them, right? You need to be able
Sure.
to capture their attention, be able to share the story, be able to show them where you want it to go in an easy fashion. So
Yeah.
those are probably the 2 big areas.
Cool. Yeah, I think, I think you coined this phrase and said this to me of what is it, multiple single sources of truth, uh,
Yeah,
in,
that was a
in,
fun one.
in data, as related to a project we were working on at one point. But I think you're right in that there's so many sources now. And I think organizationally, there's not, when you go look at it, if you were starting off and said, hey, you walked into an organization, somebody's like, here's our reports. You kind of have
Mhm.
to assume that you're going to have to pick a source system. And whether you
Yeah,
feel like it's got the most accurate data or not, at least you have everybody's using the same, right? And then
which
you'll
is
start to
hugely
see
critical.
I've always said the fastest way from a technical perspective, because this has been my life is implementing technical systems and so forth in organizations, is the fastest way to display errors in your process, um, gaps in your data, is to
Hmm.
put a system around it or put a process around it. I mean, you
Yeah, agreed.
immediately, you immediately start to see, run one report out of whatever system that you've implemented. You're going to immediately
Yeah,
go, oh crap, we've got a lot of work to do.
yeah. Didn't think about this, didn't think about that, whatever it may be, right?
Yeah, and there's all these opportunities I think for folks to go in and do that. And so it's interesting because we've seen recent times, we've seen pictures and shared through some groups that we're in. We've seen pictures of the marketing tech world,
Hmm.
and all of the systems that are out there and all the capabilities for data. And there's so many places out there that are promising this panacea, promising this silver bullet of,
Yep.
we use our system and use our machine learning, use our AI, use our whatever NLP processing. We'll promise you the world. And I think at the end of the day, you can attest to this. Most of that's hokey crap. You got to get your hands
Yeah,
dirty, and do a lot of the basics of
yeah, you
just
do.
running some basic reports.
Yeah. So getting consistent early on with the data that you're collecting and that you're presenting back out is hugely important. It can be wrong, and you can know it's wrong up to a certain degree. But if you know it's wrong, everybody agrees that it's wrong, and then you're consistent though with trying to improve it, then that works much better than trying to say, well, I'm going to go fix all this first because you don't know how long it's going to take. But at least you can start with something and you can move forward with it. But yeah, getting back to your point about having a single source of truth, not multiple single sources of truth, um, that will forever live in infamy. Um, just pick a system, whatever it may be, whatever you think is either the most reliable, most consistent, or most critical. Pick your poison, and then go from there, and then build things around that. And then once you understand that, then you can start to expand that consistency out to other systems, and you can say, okay, as we're looking at the results from system A, we know what those are, we see how those match up with system B, and then you start to figure out how to weave those together, and you get more consistent with more systems over time, but you have to stay consistent.
Yeah. Yeah, that single source of truth piece it's a hard one for a lot of people to swallow. I've seen it multiple times of just people coming in and saying, hey, like, well, I've got this new system and it promises this data, and it's like, okay, well,
Right.
we're kind of already gathering that data over here on this other system. We don't really
Yeah.
need it. We're going to go back to this one. Uh, you know, it seems that in all systems I've ever implemented, the newest, shiniest system is the one that everybody wants to go look at as the source of truth. And it's like, well, let's go back to the tried and true. Let's go to the old school, the system that's been
Right.
in place for 20 years, whether it be, whatever CRM of your choice that's in place. You may not like it, but it's got all of your historicals in it, right? It's got
Right.
everything that you could ever want to be able to pull information from. So,
Yeah. It's almost like older cars versus newer cars, right? All the newer cars have all the technology and the chips and everything placed inside of it. But if something goes wrong, good luck trying to figure out what happened and trying to diagnose it yourself. But if you go back to something that was built in the 60s that's got a 4-bar carburetor on it, you can probably get that thing up and running by yourself in no time. And it's consistent. Now, not to say that you can't try to supercharge something and try to bring it forward and make it modern, but you got a point that some just the things with all the newest bells and whistles, sometimes they haven't been proven yet.
yeah,
And also with a
yeah,
lot of the bigger companies that try to bring that single silver bullet solution, chances are they've bought out a few different companies to stitch all that together. And once you get under the hood and you start looking at how they've integrated all those different systems, it's not as clean as you think it is. They
yeah,
say it is, but I have yet to see a single integrated solution through acquisition that actually is integrated.
yeah, yeah. So let's talk about that external data sources. So we've spent all of our time so far talking about all internal, right? Like things that
Yeah,
we
yeah,
can gather on our own. What when you go to look for external data sources, and we can pick on list vendors, right? Because
yeah.
I mean, we all get 1,000 messages from them a day, every day that says that my list is the best list. What do you look for in
Sure.
a list vendor? What are red flags for you if somebody approaches you? Um, I kind of want to put this in a way that would be helpful for these smaller businesses that may be listening to this, or other marketers that say, XYZ company came to me and said they promised me a list of 10,000 people that went to this conference and are
Hmm.
legit, opportunities or people that are interested in this area, and it's going to cost me XYZ to buy it. How do you approach those things?
So first thing, if you ever see an offer come across from an Outlook.com address, you can probably delete that one real quick because
I get that
it
all
is
the time, man.
not legit. um,
You know what? Hold on, real
they're
quick.
getting their list from.
I really want to know because it's kind of back to like the Nigerian prince scam
Yeah,
of like send me your credit card information so I can give you $2 million or whatever, a cut of the $2 million. How many people have actually bought that from them from those places that send from an Outlook.com email address or Hotmail? I get those too.
yeah. I mean, if it didn't work, people wouldn't do it, right?
I guess that's
So
true.
I don't know how many. I don't know how many it takes to be profitable on that. But if people didn't respond and didn't click in, they wouldn't do it.
Yeah,
Plain and simple.
maybe it just takes one. That's
Maybe
it. I
so.
don't know.
So, because what I do think is most of those services, I'll put that in quotes, that are offering out things like that, they're getting it from a centralized point. So there's
Sure.
probably, if you're going out and you're trying to find data on things, there's probably 5 or 6 key things that are out there that are, I mean, you've got your gold standard like Dun and Bradstreet, which no startup can afford. But then from there, you get down into things like Zoom Info, which is more affordable, still a little
Hmm.
bit pricey.
Yeah.
But then there's other list brokers that are out there that can go through and they can append data. They can let you buy data from them. Um, and if you're paying anything more than I don't know, I think about 75 cents a record, maybe 60 cents a record, something like that, you're probably paying too much. Um,
Yeah. So real
but you
quick,
should.
that's the price, the standalone. That's the price as of April 2nd, 2021.
The last time I looked, that's usually what it was ranging about, and it's been a few months, but it's pretty close.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, and that's to get names, addresses, companies, um, emails, and phone numbers, right?
Yeah.
Just your basic what you need to be able to reach out and get a hold of somebody. It's when you start to pull in additional information, like the intent data we were talking about, or specific, they went to this event, they watched this webinar, they clicked on these things. Then you start to get more pricey because people have done things other than just collecting the data. They've actually marketed out to them and solicited responses in return. So they're going to make you pay for that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that vetting part of it is interesting. I had talked to somebody at one point in my career that used to own a list like reselling service, and
Hmm.
and then this was a few cocktails into an evening at a bar at a
Right.
conference, and he's like, "Look, man, most of these companies, unless they're offering some kind of data appending to them, if they're just
Hmm.
offering you a cold list and saying, here's a list of names for this, but they're not saying, hey, here's a list of names and then here's 5 additional data points to them. All
Right.
they've done is bought them from somebody else at a discount and resold them to you. And
Yep.
he's like guilty of charge. I've done it several times just to make quota and numbers for people. And those when you think about it, it's like all that information has to come from some
Yeah.
source, and if they're not doing something to clean it up or vet it, by calling it, emailing it, running it through zero bounce or any of those other kind of things to make sure that they actually work, they're
Yep.
just buying and selling you crap that you could have got out of Yellow Pages if you had time to sit down and write the numbers down.
Yeah. They've got a subscription to one of those services and they pay for it once and then they sell it 10 times and they make 10 times the cost of the license.
Yeah.
Um, and it works. I mean, if companies don't have the ability to go out and purchase a license themselves and subscribe to the services, sometimes these list brokers are a little bit better. Um, just a word of caution: do a little research on them first. Make sure it's a legit company. Like I said, don't use Outlook.com as a guiding post on that one. There's a ton of companies out there that are legit and are cost effective. Just do a little research on it first.
Sure. Yeah, and I think if you're paying, you know, less than 60 cents or 70 cents a lead, then you're probably getting
Yeah.
ripped off on those.
Well,
You know,
it's they're making that money off of three other people, so
yeah,
that's why you can sell it for so cheap.
yeah. Don't hang your quarter quota on a list that you purchased from one of these weird places. So
No, definitely not.
yeah. So you're in data all day. You're looking at
Hmm.
computer screens all day. You're digging
Mm.
into all that stuff. How do you stay sane? What do you do to refresh? What do you do to manage stress? And do you got hobbies? Do you got anything else to get you away from the day to day?
Yeah. So up until recently, until COVID kind of cracked back down, soccer still play
Yeah.
mid 40s, but still get out there and flop around on the ground a little bit every once in a while. Um, Waiting to get back into it, so I'm biding my time on that. Uh, Video games, I grew up on them, still gonna love them. My
Yeah.
wife hates it, but I can't help it. Um, and then I started to learn to play the banjo right
That's
before
awesome.
COVID hit.
Yeah.
I had not learned to play a lick, banjo humor, but I'm getting there. Uh, I'm trying. I just haven't put enough practice into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are the fun things. And then just getting out, walking around, not trying to stay cooped up in the house too much right now.
Yeah. Yeah, the banjo is funny. I got a banjo. I can play the guitar and drums,
Hmm.
and I got the banjo years ago for my birthday. My wife bought it for me, and I was like, I'm gonna learn to play this thing. Like this is I've always been intrigued by them. I love them. I love the
Hmm.
way they sound. I think they're fun. So I bought one. Same thing as you, man. Like I I started working on the Earl Scruggs finger rolls,
Yep.
which is interesting because I can do some different claw techniques and bluegrass
Uh,
claw techniques on the guitar. But then when I had to put, this is real getting weird on the banjos here. When I had to put like the thumb picks and finger picks on to get the banjo
yeah.
to sound right and actually play it well, I really struggled because all the rest of my guitar playing is just I never use a pick. Like I don't play
Mm,
electric
okay.
guitar, I play acoustic guitar. If I do play
Yep.
electric guitar, it's it's bad. We'll just say that. I just stay away from it. I'm not a lead guitar player. I'm like a folksy, bluegrassy kind of guitar player. But
Nothing wrong with that.
the the just the act of like the finger rolls and like just trying to get your
Hmm.
fingers limbered up to like get the patterns down is
Yep.
pretty crazy.
Yeah, it definitely is.
And I mean, yes, you can play, like, you can strum it, and like the fingering patterns on the left hand or on the fretboard are a little bit different. But one of the biggest challenges with it was just getting my fingers loosened up to be able to do the rolls.
Yeah. That's where I was hoping that I could actually join the video games and the banjo playing together, because you get that
Sure.
dexterity in your hands from playing the controllers. It didn't work out that way, but it was a dream. But
Yeah.
no, but I do remember you laughed at me when I got the banjo, because you asked if I'd ever played guitar before, and I said no, and I said you're a dumbass. It's going to be the hardest thing you ever do. I do remember that quote from
I don't know if I called you a dumbass for that. Maybe something else. I'm sure I've called you a dumbass for
you.
something else, but not that. Yeah, the it's fascinating because like you would think that there's some like crossover. It's like, okay, well, I can play the guitar
Hmm.
but it's all in the right hand, man. I bought the Earl Scruggs book, and I was trying
Yeah,
to do that finger rolling exercises. The other problem is it's so damn loud. So like
it is,
my
and there's
guitar,
no way to mute it.
no, my guitar, my acoustic guitar, I can go downstairs, go in my bedroom, shut the door. My kids are upstairs asleep at night, and I can play my acoustic guitar and control the volume and keep it down at a reasonable value. That it's not gonna wake them up. Man, you
Right.
bust out the banjo, and it's like, alert the neighbors. We're
Yeah.
having we're having a party. Mike's over here
Yeah.
trying to learn how to play the banjo.
It just carries, and if you want to get the right sound, the right pitch, you have to play it right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I also play the drums, so I mean but I do that during the day, and that's, I don't. I'll usually once or so a week I'll reserve an hour and run the wife and kids off and throw on some headphones and play the drums and just annoy the hell out of the neighbors. But whatever.
Hey, you got
So
to relax. You got to take your breaks somehow, right?
yeah, yeah,
Especially these
that
days.
relaxation part is pretty key, especially right now. I mean, with all the COVID stuff going on, it's hard to disconnect and get away. But
Yeah.
yeah, um,
No, you do a better job, I think, than I do about getting out, and well, you've got the kids that are younger too, so I think that kind of helps spur things on. You got to get them out, get them, uh, keep them entertained.
yeah,
But I am envious sometimes of the stuff that you're out there doing, just being out there in nature and stuff. So,
yeah. Just got to go out, man. Parks are wide open. There's nobody at them.
mm,
Like everybody's staying at home right now, and so that's why I'm like, I just go to the park, just go for a little hike at the park. I'm not even going anywhere crazy. I'm just literally driving like a mile from my house where I could just walk to the park. I should just walk there, but I drive there and get out and like go walk in a trail in the woods that either some pot smokers came up with or like some high school kids go back to their drink or something. There's like these random trails in the woods that aren't like
yeah,
real trails, but or animal trails. I don't know. Just walk around, touch a tree, just be in nature for a little bit and
yeah,
refresh your
it's nice
brain.
to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It's hard. It's a hard thing to do because it's not easy to get away. But
Mm-mm.
um, so I'm trying to think of where do we go from here with data. I mean, uh, are there any other points or things that you think we should talk about that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, I actually made notes for the conversation. I was doing my research and looking into some of the stuff. So one of the things we didn't talk about, we talked about a little bit about collecting data, but there's also the attribution of what you do with it, and where it comes from. One of the big questions that or marketing always gets asked from sales usually is, all right, what's working? Former CMO asks that
Yeah,
all the time, and biggest, it's the simplest, but biggest question you'll ever get asked: what's
sure.
working? And it took us a long time, but we finally got to a point where we could see where the data is coming from, and which pieces of collateral, which things on the website, which emails, all of it getting tagged in different ways, and through different types of attribution, we can stitch it all together at this point. We can actually answer the question, what's working, whether it's this email, that email, sending a certain email first, we're working on that, or if it's coming to the website first, things like that. Um, but a lot of times, the question comes up of whether you attribute the first touch more or the last touch more. Um, Again, there's probably not a better answer between the two. Just stay consistent with what you do.
Yeah.
But the panacea for especially B2B marketing is multi-touch. That's something I've been working on for since 2006, I think, was when I first kind of thought that that would be a
Hold
good
on.
idea.
I gotta do some
Yeah,
math here.
I'm a so 2006 is when I started messing with that, and it started from a simple email campaign.
Sure.
I say simple, but it was we had an email that we sent out, and sales was looking for people to call. I said, okay, cool. I had a really good click-through rate on this and a good open rate on this email. Here, take this list of 50 people or something like that and call into it. So they called into it, had the best results they'd ever had off of any like single type of campaign thing like
Yeah.
that. They said, we want more. Okay. So I spent the next 10 years trying to figure out how to do multiple touch and trying to pull in all that it wasn't 10 years, it was more like 14, trying to pull in all that different data into a true, like, here's every touch point that happened along the way and start to score it and put some value and meaning behind it. But finally, over the last couple of years, we've gotten there, and it's been almost a lifelong dream, man, of, of really trying to dig in and understand it. But back to the technology and all the data that's coming in, it's finally to a place where marketing can do that. And all these kids that are coming out of college these days won't understand the struggle that we had to go through for such a long time.
Yeah.
Of being able to say what happened first or second or third, and does it have different meanings along the way? It's finally here. Such a
Yeah.
cool thing.
Yeah, that's what's funny is that, it's interesting. When you start to like think about, when I start to think about like where we go from here in terms of like into the future of
Mm,
where the opportunities are for jobs, where the opportunities are for disruption and so forth, you start
hmm
to think about something that I'm actually honestly 100% nervous about into the future is that most of the folks coming out of college right now are being dropped into jobs and places and that have systems that already work.
mm.
Um, and they've not, and I hate to sound like an old man here about this, but I'm going to be an old man for a
Now
second.
bring it out. Bring out the old man.
Yeah, get off my lawn, guys. But when you start to think about it, it's like they've never had to, work really hard to get two disparate systems of data together, right? And I know
True.
some of them, I know some do, and there's some instances there, but back when we started with all this and we started with, all the different things that we've done over our career, we didn't
Hmm.
have the data. We didn't have
Yeah.
information about this stuff. We didn't have systems that are put in place, and we've had to build those foundations over time. And
Yep.
what I think is going to be a challenge for a lot of folks, and I think you probably see this when people are like entrepreneurs and they start, they have these startup companies. I think where you start to see problems are going to be where people just assume that you can answer those questions you just said of what's working
Yeah.
just by just the fact that you have a website and an email
Yeah.
marketing tool. And it's like, well, no, like there's been, to your point, years and years and years and years of sweat equity put into building out some kind of like a data warehouse or just even knowledge of
Yeah.
how these things come together. And I
Right.
feel almost like there's a point where I'm nervous for the future because they haven't had that opportunity or that challenge put in front of them that says you don't have anything to work with. Now figure out how
Right.
to get something to work with.
Yeah, and it's like coders building websites today, right? You've got
Yeah.
WordPress and Drupal and things out there like that, where they've got all these kernels and code that are put together already, and so no one has to go line by line to code out the HTML that makes a website work. But you're
Yeah.
right, data is the same way, and pulling that in, um, yeah, they don't know the struggle, but there are, for most of the applications that marketing and sales uses, there are built-in reports. There's built-in data collection things that make it easier. So I don't think they'll ever have to struggle as much as we did. They may not know it. They may get to a point where they may have to think about it a little bit, put a little bit of sweat into it, but at least the basics are there, and it keeps expanding all the time, just like coding does for a site, right? It's better every iteration that comes out, and it's easier to get the things.
Sure.
It's just I don't know. I don't. I don't worry about it maybe as much as you are, because there are actually some really smart kids that are coming out these days. But even for startup businesses, if you get some basic stuff through Squarespace or something like that, there's basic reporting that's built in, and that'll integrate in with different email systems that like MailChimp or something like
Yeah.
that, and you can start to pull it together.
Yeah. Yeah, you talk about that, the ones that we know of, which I'm going to be petitioning, just so you're aware. I'm going to be petitioning to get them to come on here and talk, because I would love to pick their brains, the younger kids that are coming out straight
You
out of
should.
college. Let me tell you, man, there is the hope and excitement of that, of where they are. They're landing into jobs with knowledge and skills that took me even after
Mhm.
college, because I mean, we just didn't have all these systems. They're coming into these jobs with
Right.
like 5 years worth of what I would consider like real experience, even though they haven't had the job experience, just their knowledge level of where they are in their career. And
Yeah,
I think that's really important. I think
it
that's a
is.
challenge, that when you go look for jobs out there, and for anybody that's listening to this, when you're young and you're looking for jobs, it's unrealistic. I saw a thing about this one time. I can't remember which language it was, but somebody that actually wrote the programming language
Mhm.
tweeted out this job rec and was like, "That's funny. I can't get, the job rec was like, we need somebody with this experience in this language, and they have to
Yeah,
have 10 years of experience."
I
And the
remember that
guy's like,
example.
he's like, that's funny, because I wrote the language and I don't even have 10 years worth of experience with it. And
Yeah.
I think there's some like from some hiring practices that we probably, as the older generation of folks hiring people in leadership roles here, I feel like there's probably some hiring practices we got to go back and look at in terms of like skill levels and so forth. Because
Sure.
I mean, the program. Let me just shout out to University of Texas Dallas and their
Oh
marketing
yeah.
program. I mean, those guys over there, the kids that we've seen come in as interns, I keep calling them kids, they're grown adults, they can drink. Um,
That is some kids.
most of them.
My kids are the same age as them, so they're kids.
Well, that's true. You started way earlier than I did.
That's where this comes
But
in.
their skill level and their knowledge level coming straight out of college is just,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
They've actually, that program, plug for that program, and anybody that get kids that you guys have gotten a good program there, because they're teaching them real world stuff. I mean, they're coming in
Hmm.
as interns to work with us at the company we work at, and like it's amazing, because they come in and we're like, here, go do this, and they're like, okay, and they know how to do
Yeah,
it, and I'm
they
not
do.
having to like go, well, you do this and this, and like they're coming in with real, knowledge. And
Yeah.
the only skills I think we're having to teach are more around just navigating corporate America, which is a whole
Yeah.
nother episode we can go
The
talk
politics of it
about.
and everything. Yeah, I agree. No, but you're right though, and UTD does a really good job. They actually have a marketing analytics degree over there now.
Yeah.
It's an MBA in marketing analytics, which I don't think that existed 2 years ago.
Oh yeah.
Um, that's just how much the data side and the analytics side is progressing, and how quickly it's progressing. If you can have an actual degree in something, it's they're trying to get those pumped out as fast as possible. So it's probably a little still behind the times a bit, but
Sure.
again, that's just how much it's changed. But yeah, UTD does a fantastic job over there, and other schools are doing it too. They've changed it for sure. And this is one thing I try to keep up on. As every intern that we come in, I always ask, "What are they teaching you guys? Let me see your syllabus. Let me see your
Yeah.
curriculum and stuff," because I want to know. But they've changed it up so that it is much more real world experience, and the new grads that are coming in today have a better sense than what we did, which was just, I don't know, you memorize all the bold text things in the book
Yeah.
and you pass the exam.
Yeah.
That's not the same anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my storied past. I have a traditional advertising degree
Mm,
from the University of Texas Arlington journalism. It was in the journalism department,
okay,
and the reason you got it in the journalism department is because it was newspapers. Like, I
makes
mean,
sense.
we graduated around college around the same time.
Yep.
Uh, I graduated in 2000, and I'm
Yep.
thinking like, you know, back then it's like, oh, that's cutting edge. It's like year 2000. It's like here we are 21 years later. But when the whole advertising world was all about media buys. It was about going in and looking for how to billboards,
Hmm.
newspaper, magazine, uh, direct mailers, circulars, those Valpak things. It
Yeah.
was all they were teaching us all of that stuff, and that was at the time was kind of like the cutting edge. And the internet
Hmm.
was there, and we had the internet, and we had access to it, but it wasn't. You know, it wasn't as robust as it is today in terms of just the ad part, like thinking
Yeah.
about that part. Like people weren't thinking, I'm sure they were. I mean, it was more of like a pay to play because it was still during the AOL days of like, get your minutes, you had to pay
Yeah.
for it. And now it's like,
Right.
okay,
Right.
well, we figured out a model where we can give it away and we just serve you a bunch of ads that people pay for, and then that pays for itself, and we can make
Right.
gazillions of dollars and become Google and do all these fun things. So,
Yeah.
uh,
But even just a few years ago, talking about the interns and coming up, we had one. She was getting a graphic design degree, and she was trying to figure out. She didn't think that she fit in marketing um, because she was trying to figure out how to do more of the art side of things.
sure.
Um, so I had the discussion with her. It's like, just figure out how to measure how it works. If you can
Yeah.
do that, then you can say, yep, the things I did, the things I produced made this difference along this path or this path. They worked, right? And if you can measure and say that your stuff worked, then you can market yourself and you can become successful that way.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to it. I mean, it's sounds like she maybe I should have talked to her because there's a lot of the conversation that I have with the folks on my teams and have over the years and looked at as a uh, I hate to call myself a graphic designer because I never lived up to that title, but I did some graphic design
Yeah,
for early on websites back in the 2000s when I was building
right.
like before WordPress when I was building WordPress type sites by hand.
Yeah.
um, you know those graphics all that stuff matters a lot to marketing.
Hmm.
And to your point, I mean, from a measurement perspective, I mean, you can make or break a page depending on you know the content can be great, but if you put the wrong image on there, you can make or
Yeah.
break a page. And you can also tweak it and turn things up from a conversion rate perspective if you put the right image, if you put the right image doing the right thing.
Yeah.
If there's one thing I
And
learned about old school advertising that still holds true today, is I had an advertising professor. I think his name is Dr. Ingram. Uh, he hammered into us about looking and observing around us, like in stores,
hmm.
like how they market in grocery stores. And so there's whole books and tracks and stuff on it, but he's like, go down the
Yeah, yeah.
cereal aisle and
Oh
look
yeah,
at
yeah.
every cereal
Great
box
example.
and look at their eyes and look what they're doing, how they're drawn or whatever who the
Hmm.
artist is. They all look like they're looking at you. It's kind of like the Abraham Lincoln thing where it's like when you look at the Abraham Lincoln statue and you go
Yeah.
this way, and it's
Right.
like he's still staring at you. Like all
Right.
those
Right.
boxes do that, and I think people forget about that. And especially, I have into photography and I do a lot of stuff with
Mm.
that, but like if for stock photography especially is like looking at those elements really make you hyper aware that okay, if like the eye direction that somebody's looking, if somebody's looking down, like your CTA shouldn't be over here, it should be over here
Right.
because your eye, it's like stuff like that that's just,
Hmm.
anyways, that's a whole nother tangent
No, no, but
of
it's all
things.
still relevant because even back to the data side of things, right?
Yeah,
Once you have those different elements on the website, measure it, A/B test it, right?
right.
So see if you can figure out a way to, if you don't have there's tools out there that you can run that allow you to run multiple sessions at the same time type thing, right? But if you don't have that, run one image for a week and then run another image for a week and then see which one wins. Simple things like that, or start checking out or changing out the text to see once you get does this call to action work better or does this one? You have to do
Yeah,
that A/B testing in order to see what works. Chances are what you think works doesn't work.
yeah. That's true.
That's your opinion, not based on fact.
All right, so hyper awareness of time, because
Yeah.
I'm taking up one of your precious commodities here in
Ah,
life. Do you any closing thoughts that you have? I got a couple final questions.
okay.
Anything you
So
want
there
to
were
cover that we didn't
there were
cover?
three things I was going to say. I mentioned one earlier. Accuracy is good. Consistency is better when you're dealing with data. Just stay consistent as much as you can. If you're gathering data for people, gathering the metrics and the reports and stuff, get buy-in at the beginning of it from anybody who's going to be involved, because if you don't and someone starts throwing in opinions later, chances are you're not going to be able to go back in and fit that in. Maybe, maybe not. But then the other thing I was going to say is don't be afraid of what the data tells you. Like, the data is the data, right? Don't be beholden to something. Don't have this like aversion to change because you get the wrong results. Just trust what you get. As long as you're staying consistent and you got the buy-in, then don't be afraid of the results you get.
Data is the data. That's probably the most. I feel like I'm gonna have to edit that out and like put that on the Instagram page. Is like the thing. Data is
That's
data.
your teaser.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've had that conversation of just, if you pull the report, it's like, well, this report must be wrong. It's like, no, your business is wrong.
Well, your opinion of what you think it should be is
Yeah,
wrong.
the business or the process or whatever is like feeding into this is wrong. So, back into that. So, anyways, in closing from my end, thank you again, Dave, for everything
Yes, sir.
you've done for me over the years. You're
Likewise.
a great person to work with and knowledge, and I appreciate that greatly. I do have to close with, we got to talk barbecue for just 2 seconds.
Bring it, please.
You like this is going to be an ongoing thing for anybody that's listened to this point in the podcast. We're going to talk barbecue for a second. Briskets, whatever. What's your favorite meat to smoke? And then any quick tips for anybody on how to smoke it? Or grill. If you want to talk about grill, we don't have to do smoking. We can do grilling too.
And for anybody from up north that actually is watching this, there is a massive difference between grilling and barbecuing. And if you call barbecuing grilling, or sorry, other way around, grilling barbecuing, I might have to have words. But no, I mean, brisket's always going to be the ultimate goal, right? Because it takes so much time to get in there. You're going to screw them up. You're going to burn them or make them too tough, right? And even once you think you got it, you're still going to mess it up. But man, I like doing ribs. They're so easy. Just throw them on there, get a nice rub going. Ribs and chicken. Those are probably the two easiest ones.
So ribs. I gotta ask, you do the 3-2-1 method? Do you wrap? What's your secret?
No, I just put some foil down on top of the smoker. I've got one of the ceramic ones, and just let it sit there. I don't think I've ever wrapped anything. I don't think I've tried the 3-2-1 method. I just let them sit on there, and when they start to, this is going to sound gross, but when the marrow starts to ooze out of the bones a little bit on the end, that's when you got it.
Yeah, when they pull back, the meat pulls back on the bone, and it's starting to tighten up. That's when you got it.
Yep.
Sauce or dry rub?
So I do dry rubs for most of my stuff. I've got my own rubs actually. I've got a Tex-Mex, I've got a Cajun, and I've got just a traditional barbecue. And it's funny, it's like 80% of them are all the same, and then you just kind of tweak them a little bit at the end. But I've got 3 that I use. I try, because I'm a purist, I try not to put sauce on anything.
Okay.
But I found some sauces, some really good ones, like a jalapeno bacon maple glaze mix type thing.
Do share.
Yeah. Found that one down in Fredericksburg. Certain sauces can be really, really good on it, but I try not to.
Yeah. That's good. Okay. Well, we've covered off all the subjects that I want to talk about today. So again, thank you, Dave, for your time.
Yes, sir.
I really appreciate
Thanks for setting this up. This is fun.
I look forward to doing this again in a couple episodes. We'll get you back on here. We'll talk some more about all kinds of random fun stuff.
I would love to, and there's more to talk about for sure.
Oh yeah. All right. Hey, thanks,
man. All right. Talk to you soon.